Hello everyone, I hope you're well. I'm Callum at Repair Wins, and in the video today I'm going to be doing 3 repairs in about 5 minutes a piece. This is the first video in a new series I'm launching because oftentimes I get a lot of really simple jobs come through here. I mean, half of it's just things for friends, family or myself, and I think, well, you know, some people might want to see a video on how the more basic sort of repairs are done. So instead of putting out 5-minute videos that aren't really worth watching, I thought I would start bundling 3 simple jobs into one video. The first thing I have to do is put a new plug on this extension cable. The one that's on there currently was bought very, very cheaply, and it basically, the thing wouldn't go in properly, so I ended up removing the guards, and obviously the guards are what make a British plug safe. So when I put the plug in, you'll see that it's basically got no friction or resistance whatsoever. It can come out really, really easily. That's fairly dangerous. If this thing's stretched nearly to capacity and something happens to wiggle the cable, then, you know, this is sitting really loose in the socket. So you can obviously see that it's unplugged, and the first thing I need to do is just take a screwdriver and take apart the replacement end. So the original one was the cheapest thing I could find on eBay. I bought this thing here in my hands in a local hardware shop. It's Masterplug branded, and I don't know if they've gone, to crap yet like every other company. But as far as I'm aware, Masterplug is a good brand, and this thing should be fairly safe, and it should actually work. Now that that's apart, I can take the old one off as well. And luckily this is all just metal and plastic, so it can just go in the recycling. And then the little sort of brass inserts, I have a I know a company that comes and collects scrap wire, so I'm going to go and stick these in the scrap wire box because they have a bit more value than just standard sort of, you know, steel or aluminium. And there's a little sheet of paper that tells us that the earth and the live need to be 52mm long with a 6mm tail, and then this one's 47mm long, also with a 6mm tail. I don't normally take it this seriously, but I've actually got on a ruler, measured out exactly 58mm and put a little mark on there, because that way I can strip this to the exact length needed. I've cut the wires and then stripped them back to the appropriate length. If I was doing a really proper job, I would use ferrules, but I don't have any, and even if I did, a proper crimping tool is in excess of £100, which is a bit overkill for a DIY job like this. So all I'm going to do is just twist the ends up, and then when they're twisted up, we can get them put into the socket. I've opened all of the terminals up. As you can see, the brass screws are almost at the top. If I take them out much further, they'll fall out. This is the level you want them to be at. And you want to make sure the live is on the left, the neutral's on the right, the earth is in the middle, at least for this particular one that I have in my hands. So you push this all the way in, hold it down firmly, and then just tighten the screw down. Don't absolutely crank it into oblivion, just get it tightened down. And then you can sort of fold this thing around to do the earth. Same again, tighten the screw down, but don't clamp it into oblivion. I'm just going to make sure I hold the earth wire in place so it doesn't want to walk out. That's the earth done, and then finally you just grab the entire assembly, sort of twist it on round, set this in place, and then you'll do your neutral. And once everything's in place, you can then tighten everything down all the way. Once you're happy that everything's in the right place and it's all lined up, all you have to do is just put the cord grip on. And there is the final result. You can see that the live, the neutral and the earth are all the correct lengths. The neutral is going through this little channel here. The live is going through that little channel there, which is how it's designed. The cable steps through here, and there's a little bit of the guard that goes beyond the cord grip. That's held down in place nice and firmly, and obviously it's not going to go anywhere. These things are all slightly pinched inwards, as they should be, and that's going to provide a nice grip on the, on the plug. Wonderful. All I have to do is close it up, and then put the 2 screws in. And with that, we're finished. The next job's fairly similar. I have a humidifier and it needs a power switch putting on it. The reason why I'm adding a switch is that the humidifier plugs in underneath the desk all the way over here. So as you can imagine, plugging it in, doing that, and then switching it on, and then doing this every time, just to switch the thing on, is a real pain. So I'm obviously going to unplug it, just so I don't, give myself an electric shock. You can see now that it's not on. And what I want to do instead is have a switch about here, because that way all I need to do is just go down, flick the switch, and then it can be switched on a lot more easily, and I don't have to crawl under the desk every time to turn it on. So out come 2 screws. They can just go in a pot. Just like last time, the cord grip needs to come off. I'm using a JST screwdriver here, by the way, and not Phillips. Phillips requires the manufacturer to spend money for every screw that they make on licensing fees, as far as I'm aware. whereas JST, which is a very similar standard, doesn't require them to spend money. So just make sure if you put a Phillips screwdriver in and it's jumping out really easily like this, it might not be the correct kind of screwdriver. If you use plenty of downwards pressure, you'll be okay, but you might end up stripping the screw out if you're not careful. Now, as you can probably imagine, it's really difficult to fit live earth and neutral into such a small area. Now, I'm in luck here because this humidifier is basically 2-core, meaning it's just live and neutral. If it were 3-core, I'd really be struggling. And the way that I know that is I put a switch on this thing a few months ago. Doing this mod actually serves as a tiny extender, because when I cut this, and then I go to put the switch in the middle, it's obviously going to add a little bit of extra length, which is nice because this cable was just a tiny bit shorter than I wanted it to be. I'm going to be conservative and strip back just this much on each end, and then I'll see how I go. And a pair of automatic wire strippers is really useful if you don't own them. You can get a pair of wire cutters very cheaply, but don't do that. Instead, spend your money on the Stanleys. I've had this pair for years. I've probably used them in excess of 1,000 times. Obviously, they're a bit grubby and a bit grimy, but they're still working like the day they were made. Turns out I want a tiny bit more length, so I'm just going to push this into here the same way as it was. And then what we're going to do is we're going to step over the yellow piece and just strip off literally that much more. That's looking good to me. All that needs to happen is these need to be bent and twisted, the end stripped off, and then they get put in here. What I'm going to do now then is just get these, sort of force them backwards and point it out like this. So we will do the neutral first and just snake it under. And then when it's in, we can start screwing it in. So I've stripped a tiny bit more off of each end than I needed to, but it's really not the end of the world. Unlike last time, I'm tightening it down all the way. And then for the second one, you just make sure the wires are still pointing the way that you want them to. Sort of shimmy it back a bit, and after a moment or two, you'll get it to line up. That's done. Now all I need to do is the same thing on the other side. These two are installed, same as last time, and so now all that's left to do is to put the cord grip on. And the easiest way to do this is to put the screws through first, and then just start them off. So once you start one side off, start the other. And now that they're both started off, you have to do a little bit of juggling. Can you just about see what I mean? The black piece is going through and it's poking out on the other side of the cord grip. And then when you've got it in that position, you have to really contort your hands to hold it there. You get it in that position and then you start tightening one side down. You tighten one side down all the way, and then you start the other one. And by that point you can pretty much tighten it to the end and then let go. Oh gosh, ends up hurting your hands a bit. It looks like these wires are being pinched, by the way. They're not being pinched. They're obviously pressed up against this post here, but that's different between them being pinched. Obviously then, on both ends, make sure the cord is pushed all the way through and that it's being gripped. So that's the case here, and that's the case on the other end. The wires are obviously screwed down firmly, and now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to put the cover on. I thought, why don't we kill two birds with one stone? We can test the extension cord, which is obviously plugged in here. Running down, running along, over to here, where the humidifier is plugged in, and it's got the switch. The switch is currently in the off position, and you heard the beep, and I can press this. It obviously switches on and starts working. I do that, it switches off. Brilliant, those two work. So the last thing I want to do is build a USB extension cable. I've got this very, very long run of wire with a USB on one end, and what was originally on the other end was a type B connection, you know, the sort that you would plug into a printer, only it had clearly been strained because it was bent really sharply and the cable wasn't working properly. So I decided to snip the end off, and then instead of throwing this in the bin, I'm going to solder a USB port to the end and we can use this as an extension. My life will be a lot easier if I just leave the port soldered to this PCB. This came from a point of sale system. I'm obviously not going to be needing this little board anytime soon, given the system was scrapped over a year ago. So I'll just put 4 bits of solder on these pins, and then I can strip back this wire the same way that I've done with all the others, and then solder each of the 4 individual wires to the 4 points. The soldering iron is set to 360 degrees Celsius. I'm just going to pre-tin these 4 pads. I just need to tin the 4 conductors inside the USB cable and we can get it soldered on. All I need to do now is solder it on. So the soldering iron is set to the same 365 degrees, and I'm just going to do it one pin at a time. So there's your red, there's your white, there's your green, bit fresh solder, and there's your black. To clean it off, just use a dry cotton bud. That's going to get rid of most of the flux. If you're using lead-based solder, you can get away without using flux, but if you're using lead-free solder like I am, you probably want a bit of flux just to make your life easier. And you'll never get this perfect, by the way, but just do the best job that you can. Dry cotton bud, clean up all the liquid. If I bring you in nice and close, you can see they've all made a really solid connection. I've coiled the cable up and I've plugged a USB drive into it. This is a very long cable, so you couldn't plug something that's really power hungry in, like an external hard drive, but you could plug in a USB drive, a mouse, a keyboard, a Bluetooth receiver, and so on. Anyway then, you can see over here, there's nothing plugged into the computer, and if I just come all the way down, I'll plug this into the box. It comes up, USB storage device detected, and I can click on here, and then there's not actually anything on the drive except for an Xbox 360 updater, which is, you know, unrelated to this video, but the point is the USB drive works. I can create a folder, I can obviously delete the folder, and so on. No doubt this looks very silly, but I took a 3D print that basically wasn't the right dimensions, and instead of throwing it in the bin, I've just used it as a brace for the USB cable. So I took a bit of scrap wire, you know, forced it around because there was 2 small holes in the PCB. So the wire's been put through, and then I've zip tied everything in place. It's really sturdy. I don't see it failing anytime soon. Obviously it's not the prettiest looking, but you know me, as long as it's functional, that doesn't matter. There you are then, that's 3 devices fixed. So obviously a homemade USB extension using scrap parts, an extension cord that's been saved from going in the bin, and then obviously I'll put a power switch on my humidifier so I can use that as well. They may not all end up being repairable, thus they might not end up in the video, but I'm expecting next time to sort out this iPhone, this laptop motherboard, and this knockoff Xbox 360 controller. Anyway then, if I taught you something new or showed you something useful, feel free to leave the video a like. That would obviously help me greatly. The more people like the videos, the more people YouTube recommends them to, the more people see them, I gain subscribers, and then obviously I can put more stuff out so more people are motivated to fix their own devices. That's all I've got for you today, so I hope you enjoyed it, as I say. Fingers crossed I'll see you in the next one. Take care for now, and enjoy the rest of your day.